Welcome to the HerbWorks podcast featuring Roger Drummer, the formulator at herbworks.com. An educator in the field of nutrition and Chinese herbalism, Roger has a unique ability to keep things simple by taking all the guesswork out of complicated health issues. HerbWorks is committed to helping you improve your health and enhance your life through herbs and common sense.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the HerbWorks podcast. I'm Laura Shakti.
And Roger Drummer.
So, what are we talking about today?
Today's topic is stress is making you fat. Contributes to diabetes, contributes to just about everything that has to do with faulty metabolism.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about your metabolism, obesity, diabetes, stress, cravings.
Metabolic syndrome, cravings, all kinds of stuff.
All right, so first talk to me a little bit about stress and cravings. How does that lead to being fat?
Well, I always say to people, if you want to establish a health program and you have a lot of stress, you have to make a commitment to a certain type of diet, because the first thing that happens to everybody that gets really stressed is they want to grab something that is either sweet or alcohol, smoke, or drugs to change the way they feel. So you have to have established a diet that makes you feel pretty good and is more than likely low sugar, because you don't want to deal with cravings, because probably the first craving is the sugar thing, because you're at work and it's easy to grab. And if you have a high carb diet, which is what the government tells you to eat, by the way, if you have a high carb diet, then you're probably going to have sugar cravings, and you're probably going to reach for something that's high carb or sugar the first time you get stressed.
And that turns into fat in the body?
That turns into fat in the body. Yeah.
All right. So why should I care about being overweight or having extra pounds?
Well, you should care because it does probably put you in a position to experience chronic disease at a much higher level than the average person. And so that's probably the only reason, in my opinion. I mean, if you want to carry extra pounds, that's great. It's fine. It doesn't mean anything to me, other than from a health standpoint, you have to look at the fact that you're putting yourself in a position to have some negative experiences. So if you can regulate that pretty painlessly, really, by just dealing with stress and switching your diet around, then you can avoid a lot of the incidences of chronic illness as you age.
Right, because being overweight does put your risk up for certain diseases.
For certain diseases, yes. And that's the whole point of trying to regulate it while you can and not fall into these categories. The other great advantage to that is that once you become someone who experiences a chronic illness, you're pretty much at the mercy of the Western medical system. In other words, you become someone who's always having to go to a doctor to get help to regulate something, and then so more than likely you're going to end up on a number of pharmaceutical drugs, and by and large, pharmaceutical drugs take years off your life.
Right.
And so, it doesn't matter, if a high blood pressure drug could save your life, but it also takes years off of your life if you have to stay on them a long time. So all these things you have to take into consideration when you're talking about weight, because it's not just the weight, it's the other things that come with it.
It's the effects of having
It's the
extra
effects that
weight.
come with it long term.
All right, so for people who are thinking, I'd like a little bit more control over my diet or over how fat is accumulating on my body, you're talking about stress and cravings and what that does to your body.
Well, the thing with stress, and that makes it so bad when it comes to regulating your blood sugar, which is basically the thing you want to do all the time. If everybody just focused, instead of on dieting, they just focused on regulating their blood sugar, then once they got that under control, they could probably avoid almost all chronic illness, because all of it is tied into a system that has lost its ability to regulate its own metabolism. And so its sugar is high, you're putting on a few extra pounds, maybe your blood pressure is inching up. All these different things are happening to you, which is a sign that you have metabolic syndrome, which is kind of where this whole term comes. It means your metabolism is off, and there's a lot of different indications that you're not normal anymore as far as blood tests, but you're not in a disease state yet. In other words, you probably are pre-diabetic. You probably have gained maybe 10, 15 pounds. You're not to that point where you're, it's looking really bad yet. But you're in that zone where you're no longer metabolizing things right, and you need to look at your diet.
Okay, so before we cover metabolic syndrome, let me ask you this. You're talking about regulating your blood sugar. How would somebody know? What are the signs or symptoms of feeling like, your blood sugar is up or down? Is that just cravings for sugar, cravings for what? I mean, how do you know if you might be starting to experience this pre-diabetic syndrome? Well,
that was a little hard to know on your own unless you're someone who likes to do your own test. I honestly think that most people should just invest in one of those little machines where they can test their blood sugar every day, because instead of running off to a doctor and making these appointments, you can buy a little machine for $20 and test it yourself, right? And you wake up in the morning, you test your sugar, and it's in a danger zone, then you know that there's something with your diet that you need to control. One of the things about stress is that stress is the main way your body starts to lose its grip on regulating your sugar. Because when you get stressed out, having a stress response is basically your body tells itself to flood it with sugar. Mm-hmm. So you wake up, if you're stressed out about going to work, your blood sugar is going to be 15 to 20 points higher. Because your body thinks you're going to go into fight or flight. Mm-hmm. And so if you're in a danger situation, it floods you with sugar, so you have it available for all your muscles to, fight to the death, or your brain is flooded so that you can think really clearly and stay focused. And it's not going to secrete any insulin until it thinks the danger is over. So if you're in that mode and you're sitting around having a donut and an orange juice at the same time, your blood sugar could go sky high. Mm-hmm. And that's where the body really gets in danger of putting on weight and creating the type of inflammation that leads to metabolic syndrome, that leads to the beginning of all these chronic illnesses.
All right, so what is metabolic syndrome exactly?
Metabolic syndrome basically means your body has lost its ability to metabolize fat, and you're starting to show signs in all different parameters of your health of being in balance. Maybe your blood pressure is up 10 points higher than normal. Maybe your blood sugar is in the danger zone, or what they call pre-diabetic. Maybe you have that slight little roll of really loose skin around your waist. You have the beginning of all these different issues but you don't feel real bad, but you know that you're not in as good a shape or health as you used to be. And so all these things are indications that your metabolism is going off, and you need to start paying attention to what's going on. And the other thing about, stress, and besides the fact that it elevates your blood sugar, is that once you're in that elevated blood sugar state, it tends to fluctuate more often. Like when the stress is over, things fluctuate a lot, and you tend to get caught up in wanting to get another boost. And so you eat more sugar. So it's just kind of this, ongoing syndrome that you have. And all of a sudden you're 30 pounds heavier than you used to be. And you have all these health issues going on.
So stress leads to cravings. Cravings lead to eating more sugar. More sugar, carbohydrates leads to metabolic syndrome. And if unchecked, metabolic syndrome leads to
diabetes, or what they call diabesity, which is a combination of obesity and diabetes.
All right.
And it's a term they started using back in the 70s. Dr. Atkins actually started using it. And it really shows how closely tied together diabetes and obesity is, how they kind of intertwine. Mm-hmm. And so he coined the term diabesity, but it's basically a syndrome brought on by the government's own recommendations on how the country should eat.
Which is what?
The low-fat, high-carb diet, which has never been proven to be beneficial, ever. And they basically now have abandoned it, and without telling you a whole lot about that, but they've changed their recommendations for cholesterol, for fat in the diet, and they're trying to weave their way out of this low-fat thing, because it's basically created the obesity and diabetes epidemic that we have today.
This podcast is brought to you by Herbworks, specializing in stress and brain essentials. Check out Roger's other articles and videos at herbworks.com. While you're there, take a look at our natural herbal-based product line for energy, stress, immunity, and sleep. Now back to Roger.
Basically, you have to abandon the low-fat, high-carb diet. That's been around since the 70s when they really started pushing it. They brought it up in the 60s, but it's been around since the 70s, and they've been pushing it, and people have really paid attention to it and upped their amount of grains that they eat. And so they're eating all these simple carbs that are all processed, and it just turns to fat. Your body can't process the energy of it, and it turns to fat. So the first step to do all that is basically abandon that diet. Get a handle on your sugar cravings, and then basically gradually move into the exact opposite diet, which is more of a high fat, natural type of fat, and low carb diet. If you're overweight and you really want to get a handle on things, I would say, don't eat any grains or pastas or anything for a month, just to switch your metabolism, and then weave those things back in when you're healthier and your metabolism has changed, and see how it affects your health. But when you first switch over, you should basically be eating a lot of vegetables, some proteins, and some really good fat foods. I don't just mean any type of fat, like any cooking oil or anything, but you want to eat raw nuts, avocados, olive oil, coconut oil. Saturated fat in meat is not bad on a high-fat diet. You don't want to be out eating a lot of products made with corn oil, but you won't if you're cutting back on your carbs, because all those different processed oils tend to be used to make foods that aren't healthy and don't fit into the low-carb diet anyway.
So what you're saying is that the first step to kind of managing the level of creeping up blood sugar, or this approach to metabolic syndrome, is to have a more whole foods-based diet with less simple carbohydrates in it.
Right, and depending on your state of imbalance, let's say you're diabetic, type 2 diabetic, or let's say you're obese, and then you want to look at this and go, you're the type of person that shouldn't have any grains, basically complex carbs, because your body doesn't really need it. You have so much stored energy in your system now, you need to burn it up. And so you could go right into the higher fat, moderate protein, lots of vegetable type of diet. Just the type of diet we talked about when we did our podcast on sugar cravings. So if you do that, then you're in that ballpark, that zone to where you're going to start burning up stored energy and start regulating your blood sugar. And over time, it'll have an effect on not only your pre-diabetic state, or if you have type 2 diabetes, it'll have an effect on your weight. All these different things will start to come into focus because your body's not overwhelmed anymore by simple carbs.
Okay, let's talk about the stress component of that, because I know when I'm stressed, my blood sugar goes up. I know when I'm stressed, my blood pressure goes up. And I know, that piece of dark chocolate looks really inviting.
Well, that piece of dark chocolate isn't probably what's messing up your diet. People think that they'll never be able to have these things if they go on the diet. That's just not true. It's just that once you become healthy and you regulate everything, and then, dark chocolate's an amazing thing. But the main problem, you really have to deal with it first. And this is why the diet stresses switching over and having protein for breakfast if you want to get rid of your sugar cravings, all that. Because the average guy in America has adopted this low-fat, high-carb diet. And what does that mean? That means for breakfast, they're always eating cereal, having donuts, having bagels, orange juice, and coffee with sugar in it.
Well, even some people have a smoothie, but it's full of fruit and milk or yogurt or something, which appears to be quite healthy, right? But you're saying that's not the best thing to do.
If you're overweight, that's probably not something that's the best thing to do. Now, if you're pretty healthy and you balanced everything out, that's not a bad breakfast once in a while. I wouldn't become addicted to it because it's not that healthy for you. I know everybody loves to cram fruit into their smoothies and these things, but the reality is fruit would be better off as a snack in the middle of the afternoon. You know, protein and fruit don't get along that well as a combination, and you'd be better off having some almond butter in your protein shake. It would stabilize your blood sugar. You would feel full and satisfied for a longer period of time.
Right.
You wouldn't have the ups and downs from it, and it would be really good, actually, a good drink to go along with a stress program.
So stress really can dictate what foods we're choosing. Right?
Oh, completely. Yeah. If you're stressed out, you're going to have cravings. Unless you've done something to regulate your cravings, the stress is just what pushes you over the edge, and then you're ready to grab anything. Again, why? To change the way you feel.
Now, wasn't the first group of people that were interested in TianChi, or one of this kind of subgroups of people that buy TianChi for stabilizing?
Well, it's kind of funny when we started selling TianChi. You know, it's always been something for stress and brain function.
Right, yeah.
Well, the first group, and it's still a pretty large, group of our customers, were really doing it to lose weight.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, they loved taking it because it helped them with their cravings. They didn't get hungry for 2 or 3 hours after taking it. And that's one of the reasons for that is I have an amino acid in it called tyrosine, which helps build dopamine. This is why we say take it first thing in the morning. Once you build dopamine, then your brain controls its own sugar cravings. So it kind of fits right into a diet. And so a lot of people that started with us in the beginning just did it because they lost weight and they loved how it made them feel. And they could go till maybe the break in the morning or lunch before they ate. And so that was their morning. That was their way of dieting, and they were using TianChi.
So TianChi we think of it as an energy drink, as a brain booster, an anti-aging product. But you're saying it also can be used to help avoid this metabolic syndrome that happens?
It can be used to help you with your diet, because what is the main purpose of it? It regulates stress. It helps work on the stress response. And then along with that, it has nutrients in it that peak your brain function. So when you're more focused and you have more brain energy, it's easier to avoid cravings or even to develop cravings for different things.
And how does the way TianChi works in your body differ than people that, say, use some form of stimulant for dieting or to curb their cravings or their hunger?
Well, yeah, I grew up back when stimulants used to be the big thing. Back in the early 90s, they still had Ma Wong. And Ma Wong was a Chinese herbs, which is a stimulant. Ephedra, a stimulant. And it's been banned since then. But that was in almost every diet product known to man. People were getting wired on Ma Wong. And it worked really great for a diet, even though it's actually an herb that's used for colds and flus, because it dries out your lungs and helps clear up phlegm. And it's really good for that, but now it's banned and you can't get a hold of it, which makes all of us herbalists kind of ticked off about that.
Right,
but the reality is, as a dieter, once you got stimulated on Ma Wong, you usually didn't eat for 5 or 6 hours. The problem with it is that it completely wrecked your adrenals and dried your system out. And so long term, you do Ma Wong every day and skip meals, and basically you're running on your adrenals for energy. That's a great way to end up with chronic fatigue and a lot of other health problems.
So is that the same thing that happens then for people that do these extremely caffeinated, double caffeinated drinks in the morning to simply not eat or to curb their cravings? That's
the same thing, because once you reach and surpass a certain threshold of caffeine and stimulants, it doesn't matter if it's caffeine or if it's just some other stimulant you get from a doctor for dieting or whatever you want to use. Once you go past a certain limit, you have to be supplementing with something that puts energy back into your adrenals, or you're going to become burnout. I see this a lot with athletes I talk to that are going to the gym. A lot of them are addicted to these 400 milligram caffeine bombs.
Absolutely. I see people doing it all the time.
They don't think they can lift weights without 400 milligrams of caffeine. And so But, long term, it's just going to age you really fast. It's going to weaken your adrenals. And, TianChi is completely different. It does, yes, have a little bit of caffeine in it, but the restorative energy of the herbs that are in that for putting energy back into your adrenals is what makes it different.
So we've talked about possibly changing diet for people that are interested in changing up cravings that may lead to sugar and carbohydrates and how that gets stored as fat in the body. What resources or what diets might you recommend for people that want a little bit more information on that?
Well, the diet that I normally recommend to people if they haven't gone on a specific diet is usually the paleo diet or just the high-fat diet. Dr. Mark Hyman pushes high-fat diets, and there's a lot of people putting out great information on paleo diet. The reality is the diet's almost exactly the same, right? And if you know much about food, you can adapt any of these diets to your kind of lifestyle. So let's say you're a vegetarian and you want to eat a paleo diet. Well, paleo diet has this misconception that it's all about eating meat.
Right.
It's not really. It's a high-fat, natural food diet. So if you don't eat meat and you take that out, substitute whatever it is you want for protein into that diet, it's the same thing, right? You just have to be able to use your imagination and fit it into your lifestyle. Paleo is a great place to find really good information. Then you have the, fat for life kind of diet that a lot of doctors push, which is just high fat, natural food type diet. And then you have the ketogenic diet if you want to get really strict. Americans tend to be people that like to really get into something, and the ketogenic diet really is just a variance of all these other diets, but it's more strict and can be used for medical purposes. You don't have to go that far extreme, but there's a lot of principles in that diet that you might want to look at and adopt into your own diet. But what you really want to do is find out what makes you feel really good, and then at what level you can introduce carbs back into your diet, and just find out what makes you feel vital and alive. But center your diet around whole foods and foods in their natural state, because one of the things about eating high fat, you have to realize that if your fat's coming from, doesn't matter if it's plant like an avocado, or it's coming from animal fat or dairy fat, you want to make sure that it's clean and organic, because that type of nutrient, fat, stores toxins from the environment. So the cleaner you want to eat, the better it is for you.
And then how specifically can people use TianChi to support this move from, say, a more unhealthy diet to a healthier way of eating?
Well, I would start out my day with a TianChi, which I've probably done for 9 years in a row, having a TianChi first thing in the morning. And then if you're trying to set your brain for, to get rid of cravings, or you're trying to set yourself up with a different diet, make sure your first meal is basically a protein food with maybe a little bit of fat. If you're someone that loves your protein shakes in the morning, just make sure it's a pure protein. Add some almond butter to it, preferably raw almond butter. Make yourself this little fat protein shake that'll probably sustain your blood sugar for a good 4 to 5 hours. And then kind of plan your meals around that for a few weeks, and you'll notice that you're dropping weight. You're feeling full and satisfied all the time because you're regulating your blood sugar. Now, TianChi, a lot of people that are dieting use it twice a day. But after the initial phase and you lose your weight, more than likely you're someone that can easily just get by taking it once a day. The reality is that using it at least once a day is really healthy for you, and it helps to regulate your body's rhythms so that you sleep deeper at night. It helps with cravings. There's just a lot of ways that it fits right into dieting. The great thing about TianChi is that it puts you in a position to have a different experience. And that different experience could be just performing better when you're doing your athletics. It could be just that you look at food differently because you don't have so many cravings, because the brain aspect of that formula balances your brain chemistry, and then you don't have the stress going on, so you have a different response to almost everything in life, including the food that you're actually eating. So you could be someone that takes it for a variety of different reasons, but it doesn't matter what the reason is that you take it, it does change your experience of whatever you're doing because you're in a more focused, balanced state of energy. If you like this information and want more, you can go to herbworks.com.